They called her mad for building a walled garden. When the world turned to wasteland, her paradise was all that remained. Elena Varis once lived in a city of endless noise. Horns, sirens, voices lost in the haze of concrete and exhaust. She was a horticulturist by trade, a dreamer by nature. While her peers chased quick returns and tech fortunes, Elena found herself haunted by stories of collapse. Droughts, poisoned air, food riots just a border away. She began to dream of walls. High stone walls, ancient and strong, ringing a hidden place of life and green. Her friends laughed when she bought a ruined estate on the city's edge. Her family worried as she spent her savings on limestone blocks and truckloads of earth. You could travel the world, live in luxury, or invest in a company, they said. But Elena, undeterred, stacked stones through rain and sun, her hands raw and her back aching. She cleared rubble, restored wells, and planted seeds with the patience of old monks. The city called her the garden ghost, a strange figure glimpsed behind mossy walls. But Elena knew what was coming. Work became ritual. At dawn, Elena pruned the tangled roses that crowned her gates. By midday, she coaxed vines along trellises and watered new beds of herbs, squash, and rare fruit. She studied old texts, permaculture, ancient irrigation, forgotten orchard grafts. Rainwater was caught in deep cisterns, waste recycled, and each scrap of compost turned to black gold. Neighbors scoffed as Elena patched leaks in the old stonework, rebuilt shattered arches, and let her wild gardens spill over into artful chaos. In the evenings, she mapped the moon's path and marked the quiet signs of the seasons. Some nights, she sat alone by the old fountain, listening to frogs and nightingales and dreaming of a world reborn. Rumors grew. She's hiding something in there. No one needs that much space alone. Why build walls when you could build condos? But Elena's answer was always the same. A garden is not a luxury. It's a lifeboat. Elena's days became a cycle of hope and vigilance. Each morning, she checked the walls for cracks, tracing the old stones with bare hands, listening for weakness. She inspected the wells, measured the level in every cistern, and counted the jars of seeds lined up in the cool cellars. By noon, the sun outside was a hammer. People staggered through the streets with rags over their mouths. Inside the garden, Elena and the plants endured, thanks to deep shade, rich earth, and a web of hand-built irrigation. She found purpose in teaching the first arrivals. An elderly couple, eyes haunted by loss, learned to graft apple scions. A mother and her young son dug new beds for potatoes, their laughter returning after months of fear. Elena established rules. Each person must work, must share, must never waste a drop or a seed. The garden would save them only if they cared for it together. Night after night, new faces appeared at the gate. Elena realized she could not turn them all away. With each new resident, the garden changed. An engineer from the city helped Elena reinforce the wall's weakest point, designing a clever archway braced with salvaged steel. A school teacher drew up rosters for lessons, reading, math, and the old ways of the soil. Children became the heartbeat of the garden, chasing lizards through the thyme, learning to harvest figs without bruising their skin. Elders shared recipes for forgotten vegetables and told tales of how the land once fed everyone, not just the lucky few. Elena walked the paths at twilight, pride and anxiety tangled in her chest. Would her paradise survive so many? Could generosity and discipline hold back desperation as the world outside crumbled further? One evening, a small band appeared at the gate, demanding entry. They were thin, armed, and their eyes were wild with hunger. Elena stood atop the wall, her voice steady but kind. "You may enter," she called, "but only if you lay down your weapons and take up a spade. This is a garden, not a fortress." After a tense pause, they obeyed. The work of trust began. Life inside the walls settled into a rhythm. The garden became a patchwork of accents, skills, and dreams. Morning chores, watering, pruning, repairing tools, blended into shared meals and evening councils. But fear lingered. Sometimes, a shout at night revealed a thief testing the gates. Once, a fire started in the compost heap and nearly consumed a fig grove. Elena kept peace by insisting on open dialogue. Every dispute was brought before the group, every worry spoken aloud. Mistakes were mended with labor, not banishment. In the cool of early spring, rain fell again for the first time in months. Children danced in the mud, and the adults wept with relief. Elena, standing at the highest point of the wall, gazed out at the cracked horizon. wondering how long her green haven could last against a world still thirsting beyond the stones. But for now, inside the walls, there was life. The seasons turned, and the walled garden became both sanctuary and legend. Crops flourished, tomatoes trailing over trellises, corn tall and golden, citrus trees heavy with fruit. Small fish bred in the refurbished fountain, and bees hummed between beds of lavender and mint. Elena encouraged every resident to add something of themselves. Murals painted on the inner walls, secret corners of herbs from far-off childhoods, stories etched into the stone with bits of charcoal. But peace was always fragile. Refugees gathered outside, pleading for shelter as the wasteland grew. Inside, some worried the garden could not feed another soul. Others argued that, once, Elena had been alone. Now, she must not forget what it means to hope. Council meetings grew heated. Scarcity gnawed at patience. Elena watched, knowing the wall could shield against dust and drought, but not against fear. A crisis forced their hand. A disease swept the outer settlements, a fever that left its victims weak and delirious. Desperate families pressed against the gates, begging for water, for medicine, for hope. Some inside wanted to bar the doors. But Elena called a gathering in the shade of the old chestnut. "We built this garden to save life, not to hoard it," she said. "But we must be wise, or all will perish." They organized a quarantine at the far end of the grounds, transforming a tool shed into an infirmary. The school teacher turned nurse and a young herbalist worked together, brewing potions and tending the sick with patience and care. Not all survived, but enough did, and in time, the fever passed. Gratitude replaced fear, if only for a while. The garden's reputation grew. A place of healing, of stubborn hope, of stubborn walls that kept out the worst of the world, but let in just enough of its humanity. But dangers changed shape. One night, under a silvered moon, a band of raiders tried to breach the north wall, drawn by rumors of abundance. The community rallied, sounding the bell Elena had hung from the tallest sycamore. The engineer and the older boys drove the raiders back with nothing but courage, buckets of boiling water, and a warning that this place would not fall easily. After, there was fear, but also pride. They patched the wall and tended wounds, and Elena insisted on planting new roses atop the scarred stones. Beauty, she said, as a defiance against despair. The garden survived, changed but unbroken. Every day after, children traced the rose vines and whispered, "We are still here." And so, as the world outside fell deeper into ruin, the walled garden's legend grew. Years passed, and the walled garden became a mosaic of lives interwoven with green. Children who had arrived half-starved grew tall, learning to plant and build, to read the skies and tend the earth. The old became teachers, passing down songs and recipes, showing the value of patience and hands made strong by soil. Newcomers were always met with caution, but never cruelty. Elena insisted, each person must plant a tree on their first day within the walls. It became a ritual, an act of belonging and a promise to the future. Some trees grew in strange, crooked shapes, others flourished with fruit. The orchard, once bare and brittle, became a living record of every soul who found sanctuary. Elena, now grayer and slower, walked the paths at dusk, her cane tapping out a steady rhythm. She felt both pride and humility in what the community had built. Her walled garden was no longer a lifeboat, it was home. Yet change was inevitable. Scouts returned one autumn with news. Beyond the wasteland, green had begun to return. A river, once dead, now trickled through a distant valley. Small villages were rumored to be rebuilding, planting crops, raising children in hope rather than fear. Some in the garden wanted to stay, clinging to the safety of the walls. Others felt a calling, to journey outward, to share seeds, stories, and the knowledge learned in years of struggle. Elena called the council. She spoke with quiet conviction. We cannot keep paradise locked behind stone. If the world is healing, it is because hope has roots. Some must go, some must remain, but all must remember, we are gardeners, not jailers. So, with blessings and tears, a group set forth, carrying bundles of seeds and books, tools and memories. They promised to return, to keep the spirit of the garden alive, wherever they wandered. Elena spent her final years in peace. The population of the garden ebbed and flowed. Some left, some arrived, but the walls were always alive with laughter, music, and the steady work of care. She mentored new leaders, recorded her story in careful script, and tended the first fig tree she had ever planted, now gnarled and abundant with fruit. Children, some her own grandchildren, some the descendants of strangers, gathered at her feet, eager for tales of the old world and the mad woman who built paradise from dust. One spring morning, as the garden bloomed in riotous color, Elena passed quietly, a smile on her lips and sun on her face. The bell tolled from the sycamore. The community gathered, planting a new rose for every year of Elena's life. Her legend became part of the soil, nourishing everything that would grow after. The years after Elena's passing were marked by both sorrow and transformation. Her absence left an ache in the community, a silence that echoed at council meetings and in the garden's deepest shade. But her teachings endured, written in every stone, in every ritual, in the roots of the orchard. The new leaders honored Elena's traditions. Each spring they celebrated the Festival of Roses, planting new blooms along the wall in her memory. Travelers came from distant valleys, seeking guidance and cuttings from the garden's oldest trees. The children, now grown, carried Elena's story into the world, sharing seeds and hope wherever they roamed. Some returned with tales of villages being rebuilt, rivers running clear, and fields green once more. The garden remained a beacon, a living proof that, even in the harshest times, beauty and kindness could endure. As decades passed, the world beyond the wall changed. Scouts who once braved the wasteland found new forests, sparkling lakes, and cities rebuilt on the principles learned behind Elena's stones. The garden's name, once a whispered rumor, became legend. During the Festival of Roses, entire families traveled for days to reach the garden, sharing stories and bringing rare seeds from far-off lands. New generations took their first steps beneath the shade of trees planted by ancestors they had never met. The wall, once a line of defense, became a symbol of unity, its gates open in all directions, its stones carved with names and memories. Leaders from other communities visited, eager to learn from the garden's ways. How to share water in drought, how to govern with compassion, how to let hope take root, even in barren soil. The world blossomed, nourished by lessons sown within Elena's paradise. 100 years after the drought, the walled garden thrived. Children chased butterflies among sunflowers and fig trees. Elders gathered under the ancient chestnut to tell tales of Elena's determination, her vision, and the garden's first years. The garden had outlasted disaster, outlived its founder, and inspired 1,000 green places across the land. On the oldest stone above the gate, words were etched in Elena's hand. To hope is to plant a seed, even when the sky is empty. As dusk fell, lanterns floated on the garden's pond, and music drifted through the blooming night. Paradise endured, not behind walls, but in every open heart and every living root. As the world healed, the garden's influence reached further than anyone could have dreamed. Where once there had been only dust and ruin, now orchards stretched across valleys and fields were quilted with vegetables and flowers. Towns rebuilt in the image of Elena's paradise, with community wells, libraries of seeds, and councils run not by the loudest voice, but by the kindest hand. Once each year, representatives from distant settlements arrived at the walled garden's gates. They brought stories, of floods averted by clever waterwork, of famine eased by old roots talk, of quarrels settled beneath new planted trees. They walked the shaded paths, touching the walls as if to borrow strength from the very stones. During the Festival of Roses, the old rituals blossomed anew. Children danced in the orchard, painting stones with colors remembered from Elena's favorite flowers. Elders read aloud the garden's chronicles, sharing not only its history, but the wisdom gained from generations of trial and rebirth. The bell from the sycamore tree still tolled each dawn, but now it was a summons not just for work, but for celebration, an invitation to remember what had been lost and what had been regained. One year, a drought struck again, less severe than before, but a reminder of what the world could lose. The new leaders of the garden faced the test with resolve. They rationed water with fairness, reintroduced Elena's strict rules of waste and sharing, and sent teams to teach other villages how to build cisterns and shade gardens. This time, no one starved. Where fear once would have closed the gates, compassion now opened them wider. Children and elders alike volunteered to walk to the far settlements, carrying seeds, water, and songs. No one journeyed alone. Every hand was lifted by another. When the rains returned, the garden burst into bloom, even more brilliant than before. A living symbol that resilience is not just survival, but the act of turning hardship into unity. That year, the Festival of Roses was the brightest yet. People from 100 settlements circled the old pond, singing as they planted new saplings, each tree a promise to face the future together. Centuries passed, but the legend of the walled garden never faded. The walls, once stark stone, were nearly hidden now beneath ivy, moss, and riotous flowers. The orchard's first fig tree, planted by Elena's own hands, towered above the gate, its roots tangled with roses and memory. Travelers from distant lands came in search of paradise, and though they found many gardens, all roads led back to the original, where Elena's vision had turned ruin into life. In the heart of the garden, children learned not just how to grow food, but how to nurture peace and hope. Council stones bore the carved names of generations, each leader measured by kindness, not conquest. On festival nights, as lanterns floated on the pond, the people recited the founder's words: "To hope is to plant a seed, even when the sky is empty." And so, as the world changed and healed, the spirit of the walled garden endured, not just as a place, but as a way of living. Paradise, once locked behind walls, now flourished everywhere. A seed was planted with love.